the global military and diplomatic landscape has reached a point of unprecedented intensity as the world watches the final hours leading up to critical negotiations with Iran. International observers have been left astonished by the maneuvers of President Donald Trump. His unconventional approach to foreign policy continues to redefine the boundaries of global statecraft. As the clock ticks down, the Middle East is engulfed in a dual reality of diplomatic maneuvering and intense military action. In the heart of this escalating crisis, Israel has unleashed a significant military campaign against Lebanon, characterizing the strikes as a necessary response to regional threats. This barrage of fire has coincided with stern warnings from Iraqi militia groups. Iraqi militia groups have openly threatened to retaliate on behalf of their regional allies. The atmosphere is thick with the scent of gunpowder and the weight of high-stakes diplomacy. As various factions prepare for a confrontation, at the center of the diplomatic storm is the city of Islamabad, which has become the unlikely stage for negotiations between the United States and Iran. Both nations are desperately searching for a way to navigate out of the current military stalemate, yet the path to peace is obstructed by a profound lack of trust. The two sides have entered these talks with vastly different expectations and requirements, making the possibility of a breakthrough feel both essential and elusive. Iran has presented a comprehensive 10-point peace plan that outlines several non-negotiable demands, including the formal monitoring of the Strait of Hormuz. Furthermore, the proposal calls for the complete withdrawal of United States combat forces from the Middle East. These terms represent a significant shift in regional dynamics and have placed the American administration in a complex position as they weigh the costs of peace against the requirements of national security. President Trump has characterized the Iranian proposal as viable. The White House remains firm on several key issues. A primary point of contention is the Iranian stockpile of enriched uranium, which the United States insists must be abandoned as a condition for any lasting agreement. However, the government in Tehran has yet to officially confirm its willingness to meet this specific demand, creating a deadlock that threatens the entire process. The current conflict in the Middle East is defined by its extreme volatility. Ceasefires are announced only to be followed by renewed bombing campaigns, and negotiation sessions are scheduled and then abruptly canceled. This cycle of hope and disappointment has left military officials, diplomats, and civilians alike in a state of exhaustion. The unpredictable nature of President Trump's statements has become a central variable in the quest for peace, often leading to sudden reversals of previous decisions. One moment, a diplomatic opening appears to be widening, only for it to be slammed shut. This inconsistency has made it increasingly difficult for international actors to formulate long-term strategies, as the rules of engagement seem to change by the hour. Diplomatic voices are often drowned out by the sound of explosions. Many observers are left wondering why ceasefire declarations often fail to survive for more than a few hours before being undermined by new demands. It appears to some that military force is being used as a substitute for diplomatic language. The international community is growing increasingly concerned that this style of negotiation through force may set a dangerous precedent for future global conflicts. The United States has seen its military spending proposal rise to $1,500 billion. In July of 2025, the United States dismissed 1,300 employees from the State Department, signaling a move away from traditional diplomacy. This shift suggests a new philosophy where military might is the primary tool, and the philosopher and poet Ralph Waldo Emerson once noted that peace cannot be achieved through violence, but only through understanding and sympathy. This sentiment stands in stark contrast to the current reality where force is the dominant currency. While focusing on the Iranian crisis, President Trump has simultaneously opened another diplomatic front by putting pressure on the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Washington has repeatedly called for member nations to assist in protecting maritime routes. Many European allies have been hesitant to join. This lack of cooperation has led the White House to consider significant economic and security sanctions against those who do not share the burden of regional defense. Reports have emerged indicating that President Trump is discussing the possibility of withdrawing a portion of United States troops from Europe. This frustration stems not only from the Middle East, but also from the lack of progress regarding Greenland. The recent visit of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization Secretary General Mark Rutte to the White House appears to have done little to mend the rift. Relations across the Atlantic are currently at their lowest point since 1949. Currently, the United States maintains more than 80,000 soldiers on the European continent, with a large concentration of 30,000 stationed in Germany. Significant forces are also located in Italy, the United Kingdom, and Spain. President Trump has openly considered a full withdrawal from the alliance, which would drastically reduce Washington's security commitments in the region. While a formal exit might face constitutional hurdles, the president could still achieve a reduction in presence. There are ongoing discussions about relocating soldiers from nations whose leaders have been critical of the United States-Israel campaign against Iran. Alternatively, the administration is considering bringing those troops back to American soil. In the Middle East, the situation has become even more dire as Israel continues to launch massive airstrikes across Lebanon. These actions have prompted Iranian-backed militias in Iraq to threaten a resumption of hostilities against Israeli targets. The Lebanese government reported that at least 112 people were killed in a single day of strikes, despite a two-week ceasefire agreement between the United States and Iran. Akram al-Karavi condemned the Israeli actions. The Israeli military has confirmed conducting over 100 airstrikes against targets they identify as belonging to Hezbollah. They have described this as their largest operation since the current conflict began. Resulting in widespread panic, the Ministry of Health in Lebanon has reported that the total casualty count has risen to over 1,500 dead and nearly 5,000 injured. The United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk, has condemned the destruction. There is significant confusion among the mediating nations regarding whether Lebanon was officially included in the temporary ceasefire agreement. While Pakistan insists that Lebanon is part of the deal, both Israel and the United States have maintained the opposite position. International officials are calling for independent investigations into potential violations of humanitarian law and the protection of civilians. Iraq finds itself in a particularly difficult position. Being the only nation targeted by both American and Iranian forces, Iraqi officials have lamented that their country is being used as a battlefield for foreign powers, with strikes hitting various military bases and armed groups. This situation has exacerbated internal divisions within Iraq. In the ongoing negotiations, Iran has established a firm red line regarding its right to enrich uranium for domestic purposes. Mohammad Eslami emphasized that this right is a fundamental condition for any long-term ceasefire. The upcoming talks in Islamabad are seen as a critical opportunity to maintain the two-week ceasefire and find a path toward a more permanent solution. The conflict, which intensified in late February, has already caused massive damage. Iranian forensic authorities have reported that over 3,000 people have died nationwide, with many requiring advanced identification techniques. Israel has also faced significant challenges, with thousands of rockets and missiles being launched. In a rare diplomatic development, the foreign ministers of Saudi Arabia and Iran held their first official telephone conversation since the start of the conflict. This contact is seen as a sign that regional powers are attempting to coordinate efforts. Iranian diplomats have warned the United States that it must choose between a genuine ceasefire and continued warfare. They have stated clearly that Washington cannot pursue both paths simultaneously and must respect the territorial integrity of Iran. The diplomatic process has been described as a series of dizzying decisions made over a period of 36 hours to avoid a direct military confrontation. President Trump now finds himself managing a fragile agreement. A sudden positive signal emerged when the Prime Minister of Pakistan announced through social media that a ceasefire agreement was taking shape. This deal was facilitated by the mediation efforts of several countries, including Pakistan and China. Despite these claims of victory, the agreement began to fracture within 24 hours because the two sides could not agree on the public goals of the peace process. President Trump found himself back at the starting point. Vice President J.D. Vance has addressed the confusion, noting that there were at least 3 different versions of the 10-point proposal being discussed. He dismissed some of these documents as being poorly constructed. The dispute over the inclusion of Lebanon in the ceasefire remains a primary obstacle to a lasting agreement between the two nations. The United States maintains that it never promised to include Lebanon in this specific deal. The American administration has also made it clear that the ceasefire will not be sustained unless the Strait of Hormuz is fully reopened to international shipping. President Trump has demanded that the waterway be accessible immediately. The recent Israeli airstrikes in Lebanon, which resulted in hundreds of deaths, have served as a catalyst for renewed threats from Iranian officials. Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi stated that the ball is in the court of the United States. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps has also issued a stern warning, promising to punish Israel for its actions and for violating the terms of the agreement if the military operations against Lebanon continue. They will deliver a powerful response. In response to the continued closure of the Strait of Hormuz, the White House press secretary, Carolyn Leavitt, reiterated that the blockade is completely unacceptable. The administration views the freedom of navigation as a critical test. Iran's decision to reclose the strait was a direct reaction to the Israeli strikes, creating a situation where the fragile peace could collapse at any moment. Iranian parliamentary leaders have argued that further negotiations are pointless. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel and President Trump have both characterized the military actions against Hezbollah as a separate process from the negotiations with Iran. They believe that the threat must be handled independently. In an unusual turn of events, President Trump has proposed the creation of a joint venture between the United States and Iran to manage the Strait of Hormuz. This proposal includes charging a fee for all vessels passing through. Iranian oil exporters have already suggested a plan to collect a fee of $1 per barrel of oil, payable in the cryptocurrency Bitcoin, to avoid international sanctions. They also intend to conduct inspections of ships. The Strait of Hormuz has been largely disrupted since the conflict began, contributing to a sharp increase in global oil prices. As the ceasefire faces the threat of collapse, the United States has indicated its readiness to resume military operations. The scale of the strikes in Lebanon has been described as the most severe in history, targeting residential areas, places of worship, and medical facilities. Lebanese officials have called for urgent international intervention. General Dan Kataban, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, has emphasized that American forces remain in a state of high readiness. He described the ceasefire as a temporary pause and noted that the coalition is prepared. The Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, has framed the conflict in Iraq as a historic and overwhelming victory for the United States. He stated that the military would ensure Iranian compliance with the ceasefire. President Masoud Pezeshkian has reiterated that a ceasefire in Lebanon is a prerequisite for ending the broader regional conflict. Meanwhile, President Trump has used his social media platform to threaten even larger military measures. The International Committee of the Red Cross has expressed profound outrage at the level of destruction and death in populated areas across Lebanon. They have reported that powerful weapons are being used in busy neighborhoods without warning. As tensions rise, Iranian officials have warned that they may launch a comprehensive defense at any time in response to Israeli violations of the truce. They believe that Israel is intentionally making the agreement more costly. The geopolitical implications of the conflict extend far into Central Asia, where countries are watching the situation with a mixture of fear and calculation. These nations have long enjoyed a degree of stability by acting as a buffer. A fragmented or unstable Iran could become a source of regional insecurity, exporting threats and refugees into neighboring Central Asian states. Conversely, a resilient Iran might force Central Asian nations to align more closely with Moscow and Beijing. The domestic political situation in the United States has also been impacted, with Democratic lawmakers criticizing the president's handling of the negotiations. Some have described the potential for Iranian control over the strait as an economic disaster. Prominent members of Congress have accused the president of making decisions that could have catastrophic consequences for world security. They have expressed skepticism about the true terms of the ceasefire, noting discrepancies between the American and Iranian versions. In the United States Senate, leaders are moving to pass resolutions that would limit the president's power to conduct further military operations without congressional approval. They believe it is essential for the legislative branch to assert its authority. Despite the political pressure, the White House maintains that the president's actions are entirely legal and within his authority as commander-in-chief. The administration continues to emphasize that the primary goal is to protect American interests. Inside Iran, the public reaction to the ceasefire has been a mix of celebration and deep-seated skepticism. While many people took to the streets of Tehran to celebrate, others remain wary of the true intentions of Washington and Israel. The Iranian leadership has framed the ceasefire as a success, telling their people that the war will end on their terms. They point to the fact that their 10-point proposal was accepted as a basis for negotiation. Experts in Middle Eastern affairs suggest that it is still too early to tell if the two-week ceasefire will lead to a genuine diplomatic opening. The situation remains at a dangerous turning point, with both sides possessing escalation capabilities. In preparation for the upcoming talks, Pakistan has significantly increased security in its capital, placing Islamabad under a state of near-total lockdown. The area around the negotiation site has been heavily fortified by the police and military personnel. The Iranian delegation is expected to arrive in Islamabad for their first face-to-face negotiations since the conflict began. President Trump has indicated that these talks will be held in private and will focus on specific points. Vice President J.D. Vance and high-ranking officials like Jared Kushner are scheduled to lead the American team in Pakistan. The role of Pakistan as a mediator has been recognized as a significant diplomatic achievement. Military analysts believe the ceasefire is a tactical adjustment rather than a definitive end to the hostilities. Both the United States and Israel have a history of using temporary pauses to reassess their strategies. The issue of the Strait of Hormuz remains the most significant lever in the negotiations, with global economic stability hanging in the balance. Iran's willingness to discuss the reopening suggests a readiness to compromise. The fragility of the agreement was evident from the beginning, as low-level skirmishes and strikes continued even after the official start of the truce. There are several possible scenarios for the future, ranging from peace to war. In the most pessimistic scenario, the agreement could collapse prematurely if regional proxies continue to act outside of the control of their sponsors. If red lines are crossed, the subsequent escalation could be far more intense. As part of the temporary opening of the Strait of Hormuz, Iran has provided detailed instructions for ships to follow to avoid the danger of naval mines. This move is intended to facilitate the flow of oil. The proposal for a joint venture to collect fees from passing ships remains a point of intense discussion among international legal experts. While it could provide a creative solution, it also raises fundamental questions. European leaders are continuing to push for the inclusion of Lebanon in a ceasefire to prevent a wider regional conflagration. They have expressed deep concern about the humanitarian impact of the ongoing strikes. The United Nations has also joined the call for a thorough investigation into the recent airstrikes, emphasizing the need for accountability and the protection of civilians. They have warned that any peace effort will be incomplete. The Israeli military has confirmed the killing of a senior Hezbollah official during their recent operations in Beirut, describing it as a major blow. This individual played a key role in the organization's security. In the background of the Middle Eastern crisis, the conflict in Ukraine continues to evolve, with a heavy emphasis on modern technology. Ukrainian commanders have reported that their drone units are causing significant losses. President Volodymyr Zelensky has once again proposed a meeting with the Russian leadership. Though he has refused to hold such talks in Moscow or Kyiv, he suggested that a neutral location could provide a suitable venue. The Ukrainian government is focusing on the development of new military hardware, including heavy ballistic missiles and a growing army of ground-based robots. And these automated systems are being used to replace soldiers. In the Black Sea, the Ukrainian military is actively hunting the remaining vessels of the Russian fleet, which has been significantly weakened. The goal of the Ukrainian forces is to systematically eliminate each remaining ship. Meanwhile, Russian intelligence has issued warnings about the potential for the European Union to develop its own nuclear weapons capability. These reports suggest that the global arms race is entering a new phase. The world remains in a state of high tension as these multiple crises intersect and influence one another. The coming days will be critical in determining whether the current ceasefires can be transformed into a lasting peace.